What up, naughty steppers? It's Connor Whitmore here again with another review for you on the Nawtystep channel. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the new Panda Eyes EP released on Disciple Records, Isolation. Oskar Steinbeck, aka Panda Eyes, is a Swiss dubstep producer whose huge status within the game very much belies his 22 years of age. Known most for his wealth of stellar singles that have been grouped into a couple of wall-to-wall banger compilations, and a full-length album entitled Continue, released in September last year, which saw him delve into a few new genres he had yet to explore prior to its release, pretty much all of which was self-released, gaining recognition initially by showcasing his sound on YouTube and SoundCloud and various dubstep forums, where collaborations with the likes of Temanite and Fire really propelled him up the ranks as a mid to late teen, not forgetting the wondrous Superheroes dubstep mashup released alongside Virtual Riot in 2015, comprised of a wealth of classic samples from the genre, a must listen if you haven't heard it. However, encountering the disheartening news just as he starts working on the Continue album that he has autoimmune disease, leaving him unexpectedly tired and ill at any random point. But having completed that album and released this EP, I think he is on track now in terms of managing it alongside his work. Cutesy, melodic, anime-inspired video game electronic music, at points airy-fairy and dainty, and others dark and full of aggression. Someone who I'd say is a varied producer in terms of the multitude of emotions he has portrayed across his many tracks, but also someone whose style is very evident and clear, obviously not the only artist playing with the melodic side of heavy dubstep, but a lot of his sounds are pretty particular to him. And so this debut Disciple EP from the Swiss youngster is an interesting one because whilst there is a fair bit of it showing us that it's his, there's also enough to enlighten us to new sides of his production process, perhaps new directions that he's going off in for the Disciple label. I think one of the most glaringly Panda Eyes things about this EP is its light, contained percussion, which is on hand to complement the musicality that runs mostly through the intros and builds. Not quite light in the sense that it's feathery, full of hi-hats and delicate, almost tricksy bits of sound here and there, stuff that you would usually associate with the trap genre, but light as in light for dubstep, taking the genre's usually booming structures through more stripped back procedures without loads of reverb, making it more exact and precise in the process. This is evident in the opening track Isolated, which has a very insistent introduction, quaint and animated yet with a real punch to it through that compact, tight percussion. The sounds layered over the top doing very well to further establish its well-packaged nature, very skittish and definite. It's vintage Panda Eyes, allowing the lead melody to dance over that backdrop, creating an emotion that is balanced somewhere between the daring and the vulnerable. As that lead fades, and following a brief muffled gloomy section, we have more punchiness in the first part of the build, with more intermittent electrified chords making their presence felt, again very neat and contained, a smaller but more vibrant extension of the introduction. And this carries on into the drop where, because the percussion is so simple and straightforward, we can concentrate more on what lies on the surface. Space is provided so that the grizzles, electro sirens and growls can really strut their stuff in what is an understated but seizing drop full of character. Not to mention those rubbery, wavy wubs that just have a real pull and swagger to them, creating those standstill moments where the focus is solely on them. After going straight back into the energizing build, the simple structure helps even more by the time the second drop comes around, because there's more going on, so that reduced, stripped back platform works again as something providing space for everything else to have its say. The huge metallic tears, flickers of fluorescent sound in the background, those prodding pinprick notes, it's a strong evolution from the first drop. And unsurprisingly, my one big gripe with this track is how short it is. That tidy percussion could have been reintroduced in an elaborate outro, or the dubstep could possibly have been prolonged, there were options beyond ending it so swiftly. But there's a reason he finished it here, and whilst I'm not sure what that is, it's what he wanted to do with it, and so must be respected as an artistic decision. Other points where the percussion is noticeably contained come in the section following the drop to I Am Undead. In the drop there's probably a little bit too much going on to appreciate the simplicity on show here, but with the light high-pitched synths in use as opposed to the growls, the percussion is brought to the forefront. It's here, in this cartoony moment, that we become aware once again of the anime influences in Steinbeck's music. Not with that much direction or purpose to it, but with a really cheeky, aloof vibe that just really brings that kind of imagination to the front of your mind. Moreover, whilst the drops to the track Triforce are clearly influenced by the other artists involved, Barely Alive and Virtual Riot, the section following the first drop once again brings the simple percussion into the limelight, starting at 1 minute 55. I'll just play it this time to show you exactly what I mean. See, it's impossible to hear that and not think of Panda Eyes straight away. Dainty, pretty, Steinbeck's way of transitioning between the lighter and heavier parts with more ease. It's perhaps more difficult to notice in the final track, The Beauty and the Laser Gun, what with its faster tempo, but it's certainly evident there too. But this is one example where I don't think I quite warmed to it. Following a stunning opening few seconds where this heavenly vocal with twinkles on top becomes quicker and quicker, with cymbals and hi-hats operating in the distance, we have these inquisitive glowing notes eschewing their way into the track, making for yet another vulnerable sounding end product. But the drums that are introduced at 40 seconds in are a little bit jarring for me, not fitting for what they're trying to support, the rhythm of everything else becoming a little bit disrupted at this point. However, the well put togetherness returns in full force in the drop, taking the jittery notes from the build and laying them over another neat, contained backdrop. Again, lots of space for appreciation here, everything restricted but in a good way, well cut so that there's nothing really distracting from the centerpiece, the jittery stuff. Taking shape in a breakbeat structure that is also a really nice change for the EP. It's bare, but I think it really works for understanding the interaction between the rest of the components. This carries on into the second drop, my favourite part of which is potentially my favourite part of Isolation altogether. It's led by more interjecting electro notes, but dips into the jittery part, changing chord drastically along the way. It's just so hearty and pure whenever it happens. It's just so sweet and a really, really lovely way to end the EP in my opinion. But for me, this simple percussion factor is mightily present in the EP to the extent that the musicality side of it isn't as prominent as a separate aspect. That isn't to say that it isn't there at all, however. I've talked about the playful video game appeal of the opener, the free-spirited cartoony feel to I Am Dead, the dazzling shimmers of the final track. But the EP is probably most in its musical element in the third track, Triforce. The focal point beyond the dubstep undoubtedly being those Porter Robinson-esque squeaky sounds that just place you right in that anime world from the very off. How pleasant. Some may even argue it's the track's biggest selling point. I was told by some not to expect too much of the drop before listening to it, but I'm actually enjoying it a fair bit. Again understated, full of lots of various grungy, contorted sounds, thumping but not too showy, paying respect in a way to everything that has come before it. Thick and pulsating, more could definitely have been done considering the producers we're talking about here, but I'm cool with appreciating the sounds as they are. Especially seeing as the half drop has those really juicy stretched out moments and the second builds well on the first, more stop-start and menacing, the sound design more accentuated. I have the image of a small creature being protected by a huge guardian that stops everything trying to get to said creature in its path, remaining completely unscathed as a result. Would I have swapped it with I Am Undead in the track listing? Potentially. Triforce injects a new sort of life into Isolation as the only collaborative track, and may have been seen as more of a statement following right after the first, what with them all being disciple artists now too. But conversely, it is a Panda Eyes project, and having 2 tracks of his at the start introduces everyone to his latest creative development, focusing in on his musicality and his heaviness. It's how it should be. On that note, let's hear it for some of the growls in this EP. They're amazing. My favourites definitely being the first one of the EP in Isolated. And the interspersing ones leading towards the second drop of The Beauty and the Laser Gun. But an interesting question, are they more prominent in Isolation or when woven into the drops like in Triforce? For me personally, I love them in Isolation, in the lead up to bigger moments on their respective tracks, setting us up for the heaviness. But I would love to know what you guys think of that. Growls on their own or woven into the drop sequences, and why? Let me know in the comments. But moving on slightly, as I implied earlier, there is also evidence enough to suggest that Steinbeck is exploring new territories since his signing for the Disciple label. Because for me, this is not a statement-making debut Disciple effort, which is somewhat to do with the structures of these 4 tracks. Many of my past favourites of his clocking in at least 4 minutes, if not stretching into the 5-minute zone. Songs like High Score with Temanite, The Elite with Omega Mode, Superheroes, Colorblind, Radiate, Artificial. All 3 tracks produced by him here come in at under 4 minutes. Not unheard of at all, but probably reflective of the direction he's going in under Disciple's wing. There's little of the epic, grand, colossal dubstep Panda Eyes that many have come to know him for in part. But the key there lies in part, because he also has a wealth of tracks to his name that come in at under 4 minutes, released way before this EP, that I really enjoy. Shuriken, Aurora, Boss Level. Enough to suggest that this direction change is not completely out of the blue in terms of structure. I think it lies more in the ideas. I've discussed how the percussion is a good way of spotting that these tracks are his, but he's certainly taking more on here with the concepts he's exploring. A lot of it, in my opinion, is to do with some bits of Isolation not quite being expanded on enough. I touched on the ending to Isolated, but the drops to I Am Undead could have been fleshed out more, the midsection to The Beauty and the Laser Gun could have had more of an arc to it. Pushing Triforce to one side momentarily because it doesn't apply solely to him. Maybe these are things that will improve over time. For me, it's great that he's trying out new ways of producing and showing off his sound. That's all one could ask for from a producer, really. People are quick to express disappointment at an artist moving on from what got them popular in the first place, but would you really want them producing the same type of music throughout their entire career? That speaks of something that's more stale and stagnant than alive and kicking, and there's no prizes for guessing which one sounds the more appealing of the two. It's all the more encouraging when you consider how young he is, how much time he has ahead of him. If he's already got a knack for experimentation, it should get better as he matures musically. But rounding up that point, I'd say Isolation is more a display of his staple sounds than a collection of good ideas. Exciting moving forward though. Overall, this EP is effective as a representation of his style, and it's got that experimentation to it, but I don't feel that Oskar really lets himself go in these 4 tracks as he has in the past. By this, I think I'm saying that he shows some colours, but not his truest by any means. But again, maybe this is just that new direction that he's taking with Disciple, less broad and more contained, ordered and simple. There's next to nothing strictly bad with this EP, but I feel there's a decent amount that could have been pushed further, developed and fleshed out, leading me to wonder whether his style works in the straight 3 or 4 banger EP format. Because I know for sure it works well in his huge standalone singles and the album format, where his sound feels more liberated, but he's made something a little different here, and whilst it's a change, it's something that we must accept now and get used to. So much has changed for him in the last year or so, so many different influences on his music right now, it was inevitable that we would witness some changes to his production style. He has said that Isolation is an EP about finally getting out to LA and being around the Disciple family, where everyone is on the same wavelength, away from the isolation of Switzerland. There's a confidence in him now to try new things out, and no one should knock him for that. Particularly considering his recent diagnosis as well, which apparently I Am Undead is all about. Him saying I'm still alive and kicking, I'm gonna pursue this thing and make it happen, which is just such a great thing to hear. Some people may not like the direction change, ideas-wise, structures-wise, whatever, but you've got to let the artist do what they want. And we should be grateful that he's still with us here today, producing, doing what he loves most. Read a couple of interviews with him and he's a very philosophical guy, knows his scene, values the community, definitely an artist to cherish. Now in terms of a favourite from the EP, then I think I would have to go with the first track, Isolated. For me, this is the most emotionally charged track of the four. I love the vulnerability of it, mixed in with the voraciousness of those growls. A really powerful, moving contrast. And in terms of recommendation, if you enjoyed this EP, then I would look at Chime, Temanite, Nanomake, Delta Bot, Asora. You know, artists really bringing melody and heaviness together in the dubstep scene. And also a track by Loz called Field Train. If you love any of those artists, then you will love that song for sure. And so that is that for another review on the Nawtystep channel. This time of the debut Disciple EP from Panda Eyes, Isolation. Thank you very much, and as always, for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts on Isolation. What did you guys make of it? Do you have a favourite track of the four? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hitting that notification bell along the way so you can be notified whenever I upload to the Nawtystep channel. Next to my head there should be some other Disciple reviews from the channel, so if you enjoyed this one then be sure to check those out too. And don't forget to like and follow Nawtystep across all social media if you haven't already. With everything linked, including those recommendations, in the description box down below. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure as always to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see you all in the next one. Peace out.